Okay. Hi, everyone, and welcome to my channel, Math Made Easy with Terry in 10 minutes. In the last video, I talked about graphing of absolute values. This video is going to be a follow-up video, so please watch the previous video before coming here. What I'm going to talk about here basically is how do you graph an absolute value, all right? And in the last video, I talked about the general equation for it, where I said this is f of x is equal to a x minus h plus k, and I gave you the meaning for each of these variables, okay? So we're going to just dive straight into it, okay? If you've not watched the previous video, you need to go back and watch it. So a here is going to be equal to 1, okay? The coefficient here. So that means that the graph is going to open upwards, okay? With a slope of 1. All right, so we're expecting a graph to look this way and not like this. If it was -1, it should have looked like this, but because it's 1, it's positive, it's going to look like this. All right. Now, the second thing as well is that you will notice that we have a -1. In transformation, when it's minus, it means it's going to move to the positive side of the graph. So that means when we want to sketch the graph, the point is going to be to the right, the vertex somewhere here, or you don't know where it's going to be, but it's going to be in the right side because it's going to move by 1. So that means if we look at the graph, we can say, I can now look at the graph clearly and say, okay, there are several transformations going here. All right. So usually I can advise, if you're not really comfortable, you can break it down into all the forms of transformation. So that means it moves from x, then it moves to, let me make it downward so that I'll have space to draw the graph. So let me say you have that, then it now moves to x minus 1. That is, the vertex moves to the right, and also it now moves x minus 1 plus 5. So that means a is equal to 1, h it means -1, and k is going to be equal to what? 5. So that means it's going to move upwards by 5 units. So if you're sketching this, so it's going to be, the graph was like this. Okay. Now, because it moves 1 unit to the right, so that means this graph is going to move from this part to this part by 1 unit. Now, the next thing as well is, after moving to 1 unit, the graph now moves upwards by 5. So that means from this 1 unit, the graph then moves up. So it's going to move up like this by 1 by 5 units. So this is the graph for this. Then you can then decide to predict what the y-intercept will look like. The y-intercept, we'll talk about that later, but from this, x will be equal to 0. So 0 minus 1 will give you -1. The absolute value of -1 will be 1. 1 plus 5 will give you 6. So that means the y-intercept here is going to be 6. And this should be how the graph should look like. All right. So I'm going to take one more example. And let's say we have y is equal to -2x plus 4. For instance, and we are told to compare and draw a graph. So that means, for instance, we are having it to be a x minus h plus k, okay? So that means our a is going to be -2. So that means because it's minus, we're expecting it to be what? This way, okay? Now, we're going to open downwards because it's minus, and also the slope is going to be what? -2, okay? Now, h now is what? 0. So because h is 0 means that it's going to still remain on the x-axis, and therefore k is equal to 4. So it's going to move upwards by 4 units. Okay. So the same thing, if you want to, you can decide to do a graph for this. So I can draw it straight away, but for some of you that might still don't know, not still confident yet. So it moved from y, started from here. Then after that, next transformation, it was multiplied by 2. The next transformation was a negative of this. And the next transformation it became minus 2x plus 4. Okay, so let's go. So this was the graph we had at the beginning. Now stretch by 2 units. So that means it's going to be stretched further. Okay, so we're going to have something like this, stretch by 2 units. Okay, after it's stretched, what was the next thing? It's going to be reflected. So that means the stretch graph is going to look like this. Then finally, this stretch graph now is going to what? I'm going to draw it here. Now this stretch graph is going to move upwards by what? 4 units. So the stretch graph is going to move upwards by what? 4 units. So it's going to look like this. So this stretch graph, oh, sorry, let me make it proportional so that some students will be confused. So the stretch graph is going to move up by what? 4 units. So that means here it's going to be equal to what? 4. And definitely, you can definitely know that the intercept here should be 2 and minus 2. I'm going to talk about that later. How do you calculate that? But from this, I can know that the graph is going to be 2 and minus 2. But I don't want to talk about that now. All right. So that is how the graph should look like for this. So it's going to be transformation of graph, basically. So you need to understand transformation of graph before you move into here. All right. So I'm going to dive straight now. The next video, I'm going to dive straight into inequalities. Let's start solving. I'm excited to start solving. So let's start solving. So I'm going to see you in the next video. We're going to talk about absolute values with inequalities and how do we solve them. All right. Thank you very much. So yeah, and if you have any questions, don't forget, put it in the chat box, or you can send me an email directly and I'll get back to you. Thank you very much.